This is a Tory government that is out of ideas, out of energy.
Lisa Nandy speaking there. Now, Downing Street says the Prime Minister discussed the ongoing challenge faced by the Metropolitan Police in London in his debrief with Sir Mark Rowley after last Saturday's unrest near the Cenotaph. Number 10 says Rishi Sunak stressed the vital importance of pursuing both Hamas supporters and those responsible for violent scenes near the War Memorial on Armistice Day. The Commissioner had come under pressure from politicians after several weeks of demonstrations for a ceasefire in the escalating conflict between Israel and Hamas. Number 10 said the powers available to officers to deal with protests would be kept under review to see if they needed to be beefed up. Meanwhile, the UK has announced sanctions against 4 Hamas leaders and 2 of the terror group's financiers. It's one of David Cameron's first moves, actually, as Foreign Secretary. They'll be made subject to travel bans, asset freezes and arms embargoes that prohibits the sale of weapons to any of those individuals. And the Business and Trade Secretary is in Florida today to boost trade and investment with the 4th largest US state. Kemi Badenoch signed an agreement with the Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis, earlier on today, which will help make it quicker, easier and cheaper for UK and Florida firms to do business with one another. And lastly, His Majesty King Charles has hosted a reception for NHS staff at Buckingham Palace as part of his 75th birthday celebrations. It comes as the NHS also marks its 75th anniversary, with 400 nurses and midwives set to attend the royal event. Earlier, the monarch travelled to Oxfordshire to launch the Coronation Food Project alongside Queen Camilla, hoping to bridge the gap between food waste and food need. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thank you, Polly. And yes, I'm standing in for Nigel for these weeks. He's down in the jungle. He knows nothing about what is going on. It's utterly extraordinary. This 3-page letter from the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is absolute dynamite. If you haven't read it, if you haven't got yourself a copy, whatever you do, get a copy online, print it, read it. It is extraordinary. I've never read anything quite like it. And my simple question to you this evening, has Suella's letter sunk Sunak? Has Suella sunk Sunak? That's the question for this evening. Send us an email, farage@gbnews.com, with your thoughts on that. Has Suella sunk Sunak? I have to say, it is absolutely shocking. I didn't know that there was a written agreement in October 22 when Suella Braverman agreed to back Sunak's second leadership attempt that she said was pivotal in him securing it. There was this written agreement which included 4 critical pledges that Suella Braverman says he has now utterly failed on. The first one is to do with migration. The second one is to do with the technicalities of the legislation to stop the boats and on ECHR. The third one is on delivering the Northern Ireland Protocol and the retained EU law bills. And the fourth one is about the statutory guidance on protecting biological sex, protecting our children, safeguarding our children. She says, and I'll just read this out, it's absolutely incredible. You have manifestly and repeatedly failed to deliver on every single one of these key policies. Either your distinctive style of government means you are incapable of doing so, or, she goes on, I must surely conclude now, you never had any intention of keeping your promises. She goes on, I can only surmise that this is because you have no appetite for doing what is necessary and therefore no real intention of fulfilling your pledge to the British people. I mean, just think about that for a second. What the former Home Secretary is actually doing is she is accusing the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom not only of misleading her in writing back in October 2022, but much more importantly, of misleading, indeed of lying to the British people. from the former Home Secretary. I mean, this is absolutely dynamite. The letter goes on, and I'll be exploring it in more detail. The fact that she's basically saying he's abandoned those key pledges. He's failed on all of them. And that actually his style of government, he refused to have any form of plan B with regard to the Rwanda's decision, which, of course, we're expecting the Supreme Court judgment tomorrow. Absolutely seismic. So I'm delighted to be joined now with my first guest on the show this evening, Baroness Kate Hoey, the former chair of the Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, and, of course, a former Labour MP for Vauxhall. Kate, a very good evening. Thank you for joining us on Farage at this extraordinary time. I must ask, Kate, you've been in politics for, with the greatest respect, a long time. Have you ever seen or read such a seismic resignation letter from any minister to the Prime Minister?
No, I haven't. And I haven't seen any letter that's been from someone who's resigned that is so clearly principled and actually not, I'm sure a lot of Suella Braverman's opponents will try to say that this is just a woman scorned or somebody who's been kicked out of a job. It is very clear that she feels passionately that she has been let down 100% by the Prime Minister. And of course, none of us knew that she had that written commitments with the 4 suggestions or 4 agreements that the Prime Minister had agreed to before she supported him. And let's not forget that Suella Braverman coming out and supporting Rishi Sunak really made the difference at that time. Absolutely crucial. I'm, of course, most interested in the fact that she had, and I'm not surprised at this, that she had got a commitment from Rishi Sunak to look at the protocol, to change things in the protocol and to bring in the protocol bill, because that was very, very important. She was one of the few senior Conservatives who actually opposed the protocol and has been very strong on this. So I think that bit to me and to people in Northern Ireland will be just another example of how I'm afraid the Prime Minister has sold out part of the United Kingdom.
And I think that's the key point, Kate, I wanted to dig into in detail with you, because the Northern Ireland Protocol was so controversial. And, of course, one of the great opportunities of Brexit, cutting daft EU regulations. It's really significant that she got that in writing, and she's accusing the Prime Minister of essentially abandoning that, betraying that. And to a degree, Kate, do you think that she's really saying the Prime Minister is basically abandoning Brexit?
Well, I think from some of his appointments, and, David Cameron, don't forget, led the Staying In campaign, it clearly shows that, and some of the policies that he's not adopted, that the Prime Minister, although he always says that he was a leaver, we never actually saw him on the campaign trail, hasn't taken advantage of what could have happened after we've left, but more importantly seems to be almost blocking things that would show that we really were moving on. And the protocol, of course, he's seeing the Windsor Framework now, as it's called, as one of his great attributes of one of the great things he's achieved, when actually week by week we get statutory instruments here in the House of Commons, House of Lords, which actually drive Northern Ireland further and further away. But, for me also, the saddest thing is that all those people in the red wall seats who came out and voted to leave and then saw that they were actually going to be able to get that delivered, have been let down very badly. And I think Suella Braverman feels that strongly and knows that, and that's why she put into one of her 4 tests for Rishi Sunak before she supported him, was to deal with the EU and the protocol, and that hasn't happened. So,
That's right.
But of course, I think what we have to say, Richard, you don't underestimate the way that the Conservative Party, when it's under attack like this, and the leader, people will begin to kind of coalesce and unite. There will be a lot of opposition to what Suella Braverman said, and she will be, ostracised, she will be condemned. But out there on the grassroots, I think there'll be a lot of people who think she is speaking really for them.
I think that's right. And interestingly, Kate, you may have seen the Prime Minister's pretty short response. He doesn't deny the existence of that written deal back in October 2022, which, again, I think is, for many serious Brexiteers, and of course, Suella Braverman was one of the the Brexiteer Spartans, I think that would be really significant.
Yes, and I expect we will see the details of that. I imagine that she is, at some stage, may well want to publish that, which will, of course, will be even more damning in a sense, because it's not just her having a drink or a cup of coffee with Rishi Sunak and saying, I'll support you if you agree these things. If it was formally written down, it meant that she was very serious about it. And he obviously was serious about it if he supposedly, signed up to it. If he signed up to it, then now he has shown that he's reneged on it. So it's very, very important. And I think what it does do is actually make it very, very unlikely that there will be any form of restoring Stormont in Northern Ireland now, when Rishi Sunak has seems to have gone back so much on his promises.
Well, that's right, because of course he's filled his cabinet with more Remainers and removed some of the more committed Brexiteers. Kate, thank you so much.
And didn't remove the one person that everyone in Northern Ireland had thought would be removed, which was the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, who used to be a strong Brexiteer, but seems to have completely had a conversion. And that's
it's extraordinary. Kate, thank you so much indeed for sharing those thoughts on this really significant day. That is Baroness Kate Hoey, her thoughts, the first thoughts on this letter from the former Home Secretary. Just seriously, if you haven't got a copy, get hold of it and read it. I'm delighted now to be joined down the line by Tim Stanley, the Daily Telegraph columnist, very experienced also in matters politics, with his thoughts. Tim, a very good evening. Thank you for that. You'll have heard the Baroness there with her thoughts specifically on the Brexit issues. What I wanted to cover with you, Tim, please, here on Farage, is how significant is it within the Conservative Party and indeed government circles that she's accusing the Prime Minister of misleading her, but much more importantly, misleading the British people about some of these key elements?
Some moderates might think that he was a fool ever to have made a private arrangement with Suella Braverman. Why he did that, I'm not quite sure. Although if you cast your mind back, she was one of two endorsements that were critical to Sunak getting to become Prime Minister, her and Kemi Badenoch. He had to sort of tie the right into himself in order to win and prove that he was able to command all factions of the party. So some people will be saying, why did you agree to this anyway with Suella Braverman on the side? But I think, frankly, many MPs are going to say this is embarrassing, but we are not going to push for a leadership challenge because we know we've only got a few months left of a government. Rishi Sunak is all we've got, and there's simply no point taking a stand against him. The way in which I think it hurts him is reputation. This turns off that corner of the country which might still be prepared to vote Conservative if they thought the Conservatives were dealing with them straightforwardly on immigration. So it's going to alienate GB News viewers. It's going to alienate some Telegraph readers. It's going to alienate some of the parts of the Red Wall which voted Conservative for the first time in 2019. And it's going to put the backs up of the Tory right within the parliamentary party. So this ain't going to bring Rishi Sunak down, but it's going to alienate the grassroots, and it's going to confirm the impression in some voters' minds that Rishi Sunak is really motivated by what's good for Rishi Sunak, that he's all style and no substance, and that you can't really trust that he's going to fix the immigration problem.
That's right. He does seem to be weakening significantly on immigration. That, of course, was part of those two of the four key pledges regarding immigration, and he's abandoning that. And, I mean, the new Foreign Secretary, of course, was pretty pro-immigration. Do you think, finally, Tim, this actually almost triggers a civil war within the Conservative Party, within the government, or do you think that actually people will sort of hunker around the Prime Minister to protect him?
No, it won't trigger a civil war at all. One problem is that Suella Braverman, although she is publicly well-known as a right-wing figure, does not have a large following within the parliamentary party. She doesn't command support on the scale of, say, a Kemi Badenoch. Another problem is that he has reshuffled his government, and his government is now pretty tight and pretty loyal to Rishi Sunak. One way in which I think this is a problem for him is that he brought in David Cameron as a jolly wheeze over the weekend. And now it actually looks like, I think, a bit of a mistake. Because if Suella Braverman's story is Rishi Sunak is lying to you about being Conservative on immigration and Conservative on Brexit, well, isn't that confirmed by bringing back David Cameron, a man associated with the referendum, with campaigning for Remain? Overnight, it goes from David Cameron back as a figure of stability to right the ship, to David Cameron actually being in his presence in the cabinet being an indictment of everything that Suella Braverman is saying is wrong about Rishi Sunak.
I guess, finally, Tim, essentially, is he just shoring up the blue wall and abandoning the Brexiteers, abandoning the red wall, abandoning levelling up?
Intriguingly, the Lib Dems say you're correct, that this is about moving back towards the centre in order to capture and hold on to the southern vote. There is a theory that Rishi Sunak has consigned himself to losing gracefully, that he just wants to lose in a way that his mates will say, Rishi, you tried your best and you remained a moderate throughout. There was a little bit of flirtation with populism earlier this year when you started talking about green staff and when you started talking about I know what a woman is. But it looks as though with the appointment of David Cameron that, yes, he's just trying to hold on to the traditional heartlands of the Conservative Party and to win approval of commentators like William Hague.
Tim Stanley, thank you so much indeed, Telegraph columnist with his thoughts there. He says that actually the Conservative Party will shelter, will protect the Prime Minister and that it's not going to trigger a civil war. I'd be interested in your thoughts. My question, of course, before we go to the break, actually, has Suella sunk Sunak? That's the question. You know the email, farage@gbnews.com. After the break, we'll be picking up more on this, looking in detail at the immigration pledges and how he potentially has broken them. Stay with us. It's Farage on GB News.
Who is it?
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage on GB News with me, Richard Tice. And I asked you folks at home, has Suella sunk Sunak? Has Suella sunk Sunak? And these are your thoughts. Many, many emails coming in, but John says Sunak sunk Sunak. Thank you, John, for that. Nigel says the letter Suella has written to Sunak is an absolute bombshell, proves what we all know. Sunak has to go. We knew he wasn't up to it. All talk, no action. Well, Nigel's pretty clear. Another viewer says, I fervently hope that Suella has sunk Sunak. We need to remove him before he does further damage to our country. Pretty damning, some of these views. Andrew says, I sincerely hope that Sunak is sunk. He's a traitor in modern times. Not much love for the Prime Minister there. Well, a couple of the key items, a couple of the key elements of the deal that Suella Braverman secured apparently back in October last year with the Prime Minister related to immigration, both lawful and unlawful. And I just want to look at the second page of her letter with my next guest regarding what happens tomorrow, depending on this critical decision from our own Supreme Court on the Rwanda ruling. Because the question is, what happens either way, whether the government wins or whether the government loses? I'm delighted to be joined now from central London by Shoaib Khan down the line. Shoaib, thank you so much for joining us on Farage on GB News. This is a pretty significant letter from Suella Braverman. Some real detail in there about what may happen depending on the ruling from the Supreme Court tomorrow, which we expect, I think, around about 10 o'clock. And essentially, she's sort of saying that it's now, there could have been a win-win, but I think from reading this letter, she's really saying because of what the Prime Minister did or didn't do, actually, it's now the risk of a lose-lose. What are your thoughts on her allegations here?
Yes, thanks. I mean, firstly, what a letter. I mean, I did always wonder, what it would be that would make me agree with Suella Braverman. But now it turns out her resigning is it. I mean, I was looking at this letter, most of what she's saying, particularly about the Prime Minister, he keeps promises he can't keep, he's weak, he's indecisive, generally useless. I think, that's what everyone's been saying. And if that's what the Tory front bench thinks, just imagine what the rest of us think about it. But yes, I mean, on the points you raised, the legal points themselves, obviously the situation tomorrow, as people have been saying, lawyers have been saying from the start, obviously initially the government turned out to be, very confident about their position, suggesting that they would win, they were sure it's legal. They have been saying for years, particularly when Priti Patel brought the policy in, we are sure it is lawful, we are sure that it complies with all our legal obligations. But now it turns out, looking at this letter, that they weren't really that sure. And even within government, they were quite confident that they may in fact lose. Now, obviously, I mean, from the government's point of view, someone like Suella Braverman, what they would argue as well, we're doing everything lawfully, but the Supreme Court disagrees with us, which I'm sure, would be offensive and insulting to our Supreme Court, suggesting that it's stopping the government doing what it is lawfully allowed to do. But yes, I mean, looking at this, we understand, of course, that even the government is now perhaps planning or thinking that it might lose. So, yes, we just have to wait and see what the Supreme Court actually decides tomorrow.
Because she's essentially saying that if the government loses, then the Prime Minister didn't take the opportunity to have a plan B. Look, I come from the world of business. You always have a plan B because you have to assume plan A won't always work. And if he hasn't got a plan B, then she's saying you've basically wasted a year, nothing will be able to happen, and that essentially that's betraying the pledges to stop the boats to the British people. Do you agree with her assessment on that?
Well, I mean, I think we have to take her word for it from what, about what was happening between her and the Prime Minister. But even if what she is saying is talking about the past 1 year. The Rwanda scheme wasn't developed or introduced 1 year ago. What's been happening in the past year is just it's been going through the courts. But the point is, even then, you say, you talk about the business world, but generally as a lawyer, you don't really start planning to start, developing a plan B once things have got to court. The point is, why don't you have a plan B, plan C before you actually announce plan A? That's when, whether that was Priti Patel. And in fact, if I'm not wrong, maybe it was Suella Braverman who was Attorney General at that time. Perhaps she was. And when this was announced, wasn't that her role at the time to say, look, legally, this is not a feasible plan. We need to look at other options. Well, of course she didn't. Priti Patel wanted to, go out with a bang. She made that announcement. And then, and then Suella Braverman obviously just took it and ran with it. But even the past few months, since the High Court found, firstly, that it was lawful, the Court of Appeal decided it wasn't. Now, for the past few months, it's been in the Supreme Court. Now it's far too late to be thinking, what we're doing, is this plan legal or not? Now it's in the court's hands. So I don't really quite agree with that assessment of just putting the blame on Rishi Sunak. The point is the Home Secretary's plan. She should have made sure it was lawful.
But she's accusing him of essentially preventing that. But even if the government wins tomorrow, Shoaib, she's basically saying, and this will be a real shock, I think, to millions of people up and down the country, people will not be swiftly removed as originally proposed. The average claimant will still be entitled to months of process, challenge and appeal. So anybody expecting a plane to take off within a few days is going to be sorely disappointed. And then she goes on to say something very technical regarding what's called the Rule 39 indications, and that the Prime Minister says they are binding in international law. They come from the ECHR, from the European Court of Human Rights. So essentially, that we're still going to be thwarted by Strasbourg. Is that your understanding of the rules, even if the government wins?
Obviously, there is a chance. The further legal course of action, if the appellants, i.e. the asylum seekers, lose tomorrow, and the policy is found to be lawful, then of course there is further recourse to the European Court of Human Rights. And in fact, I would disagree with her assessment, in fact, her legal analysis, as I think most lawyers do, in terms of Rule 39. The court itself, the practice direction, it's on the court's website, very, very clearly says that Rule 39 interim measures are binding on member states. So I'm not sure, she seems to be suggesting we advise the Prime Minister that they're not binding. And he refused to follow that. So I think he was probably correct to do so. If they are binding, obviously the points she raises generally about leaving the ECHR and so on. Do we want to be a member of that? I think it would be appalling or tragedy if we did leave, obviously. But that's a separate thing. But the point is, while we are a member of that court, we have to abide by its rulings. And if a judge makes a decision, then it is binding on us.
I think, Shoaib, millions of people will be astonished that if our own Supreme Court backs the government, backs the policy, backs the legislation, that we're still subject to Strasbourg. Fascinating insight from you, Shoaib Khan. Thank you so much for joining us here on Farage on GB News. Well, I have to say, I suspect many of you may be pretty disappointed by all of that. Whether the government wins or lose, basically, it's a lose-lose. How does that work? With the Supreme Court set to make the decision tomorrow morning on the Rwanda policy, our reporter Jack Carlson has been asking people in Stoke-on-Trent what they make of it all.
I do, yeah. I think anything that goes ahead with getting people into safety is a good idea. I think obviously the government's doing whatever they can to support people that obviously are in desperate need of travel and protection, basically. So it's a positive move, and anything we can do to help as a country, we should always try to do.
No other option for them, is there? They just float in the sea, they die in the sea, they land here, they're running and fleeing their life and things. So what choice do they have? If they stamp it, yes, go to Rwanda. They've got no choice.
I think it should, really. At least they're going to go somewhere where they're going to be looked after and perhaps have a job, or what they're going to do when they're here.
I think it should be approved, yeah, because honestly, it's been too much now.
Well, something's got to be done. Simple as that, But I feel sorry in my heart for some of them, But they're all young men coming over in this country.
I think they've got to do something, but I don't think Rwanda's the answer to it at all.
Well, there we are, lots of thoughts from Stoke-on-Trent. This is an extraordinary time. And talking of extraordinary, I have secured some exclusive footage from Calais. Last week, some drone footage. You will not want to miss this. Utterly, utterly extraordinary. There's just a little tease of it. After the break, don't go anywhere. It's Farage on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Richard Tice. Yes, I'm standing in for Nigel whilst he's in the jungle. Now, I promised you some extraordinary, exclusive footage of some of the migrant camps outside Calais. And as I'm talking, just look at some of this footage that I've secured from a drone with very high quality camera lenses. And you can see there, these are some of the migrant camps, and I think the footage will just start to rotate. This, as I say, is secured by a drone. These are hundreds of tents that are in the sort of the scrub, the woodlands, just literally outside Calais. So not exactly hidden, not that hard to find. There you can see, look at that, right by the lorries. So if they're not going on the boats, you can see how easy it is to get to the lorries and to try and get into the lorries to come across the channel. And we'll just move on now. I think we've got one of the migrants actually spotted the drone, and we came quite close up into him. I think we'll see that in a minute where he is, and you may be able to see there that he's actually waving at the drone. He's waving at you. And as I say, this footage shows dozens and dozens and dozens of tents all around Calais. And you might think, hang on, we sent hundreds of millions of pounds to the French government, the French authorities, to stop this, to deal with this. How can it be so easy that they're still camping there, all over the place, right by houses? Well, if they know where they are, maybe it's probably no surprise. I think that there is a picture of them. Here they are, they're playing football. Well, you might say that's a very nice thing to do. It's a great sport, of course. But this is literally, they're not even hiding. They're playing in plain sight. Now, if I can secure this with a couple of lads and a drone, it doesn't seem to me that you need hundreds of millions of pounds to find out who they are, where they are. You should be picking them up. You should be processing them. You should be stopping them from crossing the channel. With all the other news, it's barely featured that on Sunday, 615 migrants crossed the Channel in some 12 boats. There we are. Over the weekend, that's 12 boats that got across. There's another 7 boats over the weekend with some 200 illegal migrants that got into some difficulties. No surprise, it's November. It's pretty tidal out there. It's pretty cold. They got into trouble. They secured rescues from the French. Well, if the French can rescue those in trouble, my simple question is, why can't they rescue those who've illegally left France? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now in the studio by Sue Reed, Special Investigations Editor at the Daily Mail, to explore this. Sue, you've been on this subject for a very long time. I guess that footage, it might be interesting and new to our viewers and listeners. You've sort of seen it all before, but does it surprise you how much is still there?
I'm afraid it doesn't. I'm not taking away your scoop, but I'm not surprised because it literally has grown from 20 years ago when there were 400 people and now we've got 4,000 there. But it's not the 4,000 just there. It's the 4,000 further back, right through France, waiting to come up to the forward camp,
Absolutely.
ready to get the boats, then through Germany and so on. And believe me, I've spoken to hundreds of individual migrants over the years, and the word on their lips is London. And they think London is the UK. You understand?
Of
so
course,
they
yeah.
all say London.
They've heard of London. But if that's just around Calais, then you've got all across 20, 30 miles either side of Calais.
Yes.
You've got more tents like that. I mean, if we had time, we'd send a drone all over
Paris.
the place.
Paris is full of holding camps.
Holding camps.
Yes.
So we're seeing more footage here of these camps. So this scene, if we had drones up and down 30 miles either side of Calais, you would see this everywhere. That's right, isn't it?
Well, you'd certainly see people not in tents, but certainly getting on buses, free buses, from just near here to the beaches and going through the undergrowth, the forests, and waiting for the pickups from the boats that are now very like taxi services.
Absolutely right. And there's a sort of taxi service to the halfway point, and then we pick them up and take them the rest of the journey. Talk to me about the Schengen issue, because obviously Schengen was within the EU was the sort of the joy, the jewel in the crown of being able to move freely, happily amongst all the nations. What's happening with Schengen?
Well, it's actually very, very interesting because, and these are from the EU papers, but 11 countries within the Schengen area have now checking their borders. Some have got static border posts, from Slovakia to Germany to France to Italy, because they say that their sovereignty is now important again, their people have to be protected, they're expecting Hamas terrorists to come in among the migrants, and of course if the Hamas migrants come to Europe, you can be sure they're going to be in these tents very soon.
Absolutely.
And we have no idea who is coming into this country.
We've no idea who's coming. But you're saying that the Schengen zone, essentially, it's under threat. 11 nations are closing them, and that will continue.
Well, as Meloni says in Italy, the Prime Minister of Italy, she says it's shattering, it's breaking up.
It is. I think that they've got no choice, frankly, is my view. They've got no choice but to shut the borders. Sue Reed, thank you so much for coming in and sharing those thoughts. Absolutely fascinating. Just before we go to the break, what the Farage, you will not believe it. I'm actually quite glad Nigel's away. He would be steaming furious about this. The National Trust, yes, they've got a lovely new calendar for next year. It's got all sorts of helpful dates on it. Yes, it'll tell you about Transgender Awareness Week, Black History Month, that's very useful, thank you. LGBTQ plus month, also very helpful. Diwali, Eid, Ramadan, all incredibly helpful. No Christmas, no Easter. I'm pretty sure those are pretty important dates for us here in the United Kingdom, but according to the National Trust, not relevant. They did say this is internal guidance specifically designed to supplement the National Trust's year-round programming. That includes Christmas and Easter, which are national public holidays, which are celebrated at all properties, and enables our teams to mark more religious and cultural festivals to serve local communities and allow everyone to learn about different cultures. We're very proud to host some wonderful celebrations for all those various other religious festivals. The National Trust is for everyone. Well, I'm sure it is. Maybe it could be for Christmas, for the Christians as well. The other one, the new minister within the Home Office. Yes, Laura Ferris. Just take a look at this picture. I'm pretty sure that she's on one knee. Yes, she's on one knee. It's 2020, and she's gone down on one knee for, of course, Black Lives Matter. What do you think to that? I think it's best not to answer, actually. I think it's best probably to go to the break. After the break, we've got another MP on. We're going to be talking to John Redwood, Sir John Redwood, about his thoughts. Absolutely. And, of course, Edwina Curry talking about what would be going on for Nigel now in the jungle. Don't go anywhere. It's Farage on GB News.
Earlier with Eamon and Isabel.
We're not a Christian country anymore.
Well, all the institutions are Christian.
I'm not disagreeing.
The monarchy's Christian, Parliament's Christian. So stop making excuses for them.
There's also a big question about whether or not Rishi Sunak was talking nonsense at party conference when he was talking about change. This is back to the future, isn't it?
Got the picture of the king there. I hope we do. But now look at that. Now that is a racing driver.
Gorgeous in crazy orange goggles.
Well, that was Eamon for a moment there, but not. I could just.
I was more Elvis in his Vegas years. Someone's special day today, the ordinary person, King Charles. He turns 75.
Happy birthday, Your Majesty, from GB News.
Every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage. Well, it is another seismic day in British politics. This letter from the former Home Secretary, which we touched on earlier. I'm delighted now to get a reaction from the Conservative MP for Wokingham, Sir John Redwood, on his thoughts on this letter. Sir John, thank you for joining Farage on GB News this evening. A very important day. This letter is... well, it's the most seismic and significant that I can recall reading. You've been in politics a fair while. What do you think of it? These are very serious allegations that the Suella Braverman is making at the Prime Minister. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with some of those allegations?
I agree. It's a very serious letter, very powerfully written. Clearly, there's been a very big falling out between the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. What I want to hear is the Prime Minister's response, because what the former Home Secretary is saying is that there are problems with his small boats policy, which she pointed out and which he didn't adjust to. I want him to prove her wrong by showing us that he has taken on board all sensible criticisms of his policy. Having heard from him personally, I know that he very strongly wants to stop the small boats. There were clearly disagreements with his Home Secretary over how far you had to go to do that. And tomorrow we will find out whether they've won in court or not, and we will find out whether there needs to be more legislation. One of the big arguments that we see in the Suella Braverman letter is her thought that we needed even stronger legislation to do the job. Well, we'll know part of the answer to that tomorrow.
Yes. I mean, she writes, you've manifestly and repeatedly failed to deliver on every single one of these key policies. She's referring to the 4 points in her, what seems to be a written agreement from October last year. I mean, that's a pretty damning indictment, including something that's very dear to your heart, Sir John, with regard to Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol and the retained regulations bill. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, indeed, I was very strongly of the view that as I and others had helped get the Northern Ireland Protocol bill through the Commons, with no Conservative MP, I think, voting against our proposal, I would have liked to have seen it complete its stages in the Lords. I think it's much better to have a UK-based solution so that Northern Ireland is completely part of our single market and country, and we make all the decisions on their taxes and laws. So I was very surprised when the Prime Minister and the Business Secretary and others dropped that particular measure. And similarly with the retained EU law bill.
Absolutely.
Where,
I mean, that, Sir John,
maybe they could argue that there was some of that wasn't properly formed, in which case, why didn't they amend it? Because there are a lot of EU regulations that we still apply that could be modified or repealed to the benefit of our business.
Can I just finish? Do you think this is a Geoffrey Howe moment? Will she speak in the House of Commons tomorrow or in the next couple of days, do you think?
Well, I would imagine she'll let us know her views further in the Commons. That is quite normal for somebody of that importance and stature retiring. We now know what she's going to say, so the Prime Minister will have plenty of chance to research his answer. But I would urge the Prime Minister to take the policy issues very seriously, to demonstrate that he can stop the small boats. And yes, I think he should revisit the settlement with the EU, because I think there are a lot of laws and taxes that still apply to us that shouldn't apply, and we need those modifications.
We absolutely do, Sir John, if we're going to get some growth. Thank you so much indeed for your thoughts, Sir John Redwood, Conservative MP for Wokingham. Now, of course, Nigel's in the jungle. What's happening this week before the show starts? Well, I'm delighted now that Edwina Currie, former Conservative Minister, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here contestant. She knows exactly what's going on. Edwina, good evening. What is going on at the moment? What will Nigel be up to? What will he be missing?
Good evening, Richard. Well, I'm very impressed. I think we should call him Furry Farage from here onwards, don't you think? Have you looked at that photograph? I mean, the first thing I looked at was his knees, and then I noticed his rather sort of hairy legs. I don't think any of us have actually seen this before.
He's on
so Furry Farage is my view.
So you were looking at his knees, Edwina, really? What would they all be doing together at the moment?
I'm probably comparing knees right now. Of course, they don't always know when they arrive who else is going to be in the jungle with them. But the joint photograph shows that they are perhaps beginning to get acquainted. And indeed, they will be in the jungle and starting to do some work. What day is it?
It's Tuesday
by
today.
Wednesday, they'll be working, and they will be getting acquainted with each other, because there needs to be enough material then to come out and be broadcast at the weekend, which is what we're expecting. And he will be interviewed as to his views and what he wants to do. He's got some big surprises coming. The first is there's no beer, there's no cigarettes, there's no mobile phone, there's no feedback from the public whatsoever.
Just imagine,
The second thing is...
The second thing is what?
The second thing is that he's under surveillance the whole time, but he's not in control of his image. This is going to be a really strange experience for him.
I don't know. I think he might be quite used to that.
The crew are in charge. The edit crew are in charge.
The edit
so
crew are in
whatever
charge.
he thinks he's going to be doing, actually the editors are in charge, and they are the ones who are going to be deciding the narrative that we're all going to hear. It's going to be very interesting.
I'm not sure he's going to enjoy that. What I do know is he's going to miss coffee, believe it or not. It's not just the claret. He was really concerned about missing out on coffee. Thank you so much, Edwina Curry, for your thoughts. We'll get you back during the course of the show with your latest thoughts on that. The taste of the locusts and the bugs and heaven knows what. That's Edwina Curry. Thank you so much indeed. We're almost at the end, but Sir Jacob, wow, what a letter from the former Home Secretary. I guess you knew it was coming. Was it worse or sort of what you expected?
Oh, I mean, it breaks all the rule books of resignation letters. They're normally, it's been a privilege to serve in your cabinet, I'll support you from the back benches. This was, you agreed the following things, you broke the agreement, you have no mandate. There's been nothing like it since Geoffrey Howe's resignation statement after he left Margaret Thatcher's government.
And I asked Sir John Redwood there whether this was a Sir Geoffrey Howe moment. Do you think she'll make a statement in the Commons, possibly tomorrow?
It would be customary to, so I wouldn't be surprised if she made a statement tomorrow after Prime Minister's questions, where by convention the Prime Minister should stay, because remember, Margaret Thatcher was there to listen to Geoffrey Howe.
Does the Prime Minister then respond to that?
No. It's uninterrupted. The text has to be shown to the Speaker beforehand. It can't go on for too long, but the floor is entirely that of the person who has left government.
Absolutely extraordinary. Just remarkable. And will it sink Sunak or will he survive?
Well, who else is there? And do we really want to change Prime Minister this close to a general election? So those are the things that support him at the moment.
Your show? What's coming?
Oh, well, I'm going to be talking about this extraordinary excoriating letter. That must be the major topic of conversation. But we'll move on to some other things. We're going to talk about what it's like when you're appointed to government.
Imagine, Nigel doesn't know what's going on. Thank you very much.
And he's not drinking any coffee.
We're going to the weather. Don't go anywhere. It's Jacob.
Hello, good evening. Alex Merkel here with your latest GB News weather update. Ahead of some wet and windy weather on Thursday, we have a bit of a north-south split as we go into Wednesday. That's because we have a front lying across northern parts, which is going to bring the focus of the cloud and the showery rain here. Meanwhile, it's a quieter picture further south. So as we go through this evening, some clear skies across southern areas. Yes, a scattering of showers, but mainly dry. A different story further north. Lots of cloud and outbreaks of rain. Some of these could be heavy at times too. Temperatures won't drop a huge amount for most of us, but with some clear skies across the far north of Scotland, here a touch of frost is quite likely. As we go through Wednesday, then, we continue with this north-south split, staying cloudy with further outbreaks of rain across many northern areas. But for more central southern England, Wales and Northern Ireland, it's looking largely dry. A few showers pushing their way in across parts of Wales and towards the Bristol Channel, but otherwise plenty of sunshine and even sunny skies for northern Scotland too. Temperatures for many, though, down a degree or so compared to today, with highs of around 12 or 13 Celsius. As we go through Thursday, then, a swathe of wet and windy weather is going to push its way up from the southwest, staying drier further north, but in the south we could see some heavy rain with 30 to 50 millimetres perhaps, and gales possibly even stronger than that in exposed coasts. Friday looks like it will be a quieter day before the wet and windy weather returns in time for the weekend. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3